Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Perform Happy podcast. My guest today is another brain body connection nerd. I think it's safe to say, who, like me, has dug into the science of how do we get this brain, this like wild machine, to cooperate and get our bodies to perform to their optimal level. So, neural performance coach Yuka Sugiura is here with me today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, and I've just been so excited looking at like another aspect of the mind-body connection. So, can you give us a little background on like what the heck is neuroperformance training?
Yes, sure, happy to. So, neuroperformance training is teaching. So, what I do is I teach coaches and athletes how to activate the brain in specific ways in order to change the body. So, that could be anything from balance. So, it's much more anatomical, physical. How to, so that can mean balance, flexibility is a big one, speed, power, and then also pain. So we know, so my training's in applied neuroscience for specifically for movement, for pain, for therapy, for performance. And so thanks to decades now, is it decades? Yeah, decades of like imaging research and neuroscience research, we know a little bit more. It's always changing, but we know a little bit more about what parts of the brain talk to what parts of the body to change them, right? So they regulate or facilitate certain things. And
Yeah.
so that in a nutshell is what I do.
Amazing. And there's so many applications, I think, in gymnastics and dance, which is kind of what your specialty is.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
And
And
so,
so particularly, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, the kids who come to you, what is sort of the typical like, you can help me with this?
Yeah, I get a lot of flexibility because, right, so our performance is limited often in gymnastics and dance and artistic sports by flexibility and range of motion. And so, really, one of the fun things about what I do is that it's often, I'll do assessments. So, if someone's like, I can't get down my splits, or from a dancer, like my leg hold is just limited, or I can't, do split jumps at 180. So, one of the cool things is that muscle tone is regulated by different parts of the brain. And so, if we know, so the vestibular system, which is our inner ear system responsible for balance, we have these canals and stones. So, that system facilitates or regulates, however you want to say it, muscle tone down the back. So, spinal muscles, hamstrings, glutes. So if we activate that system, which is often one of the first things I'll go to if someone's like, oh, my hamstrings and my back are really tight, then that's a system I'm like, okay, know that system can alter things. So let's try some drills and see how that affects your body. And then very often 20, 30 seconds of doing, just head turning, like spotting is kind of one of the drills. They'll be able to get down a little bit lower. And then they look at me like, what kind of voodoo did you just do? Right? Because maybe they've done a lot of rolling and lots of other things. And it's fine. Like I think of it as finding like what is everybody's got a lock that maybe needs to be opened. And so we try different keys, right? So is it a vestibular drill that is more on your right side? Is it one that's more on your left side? Like which one actually seems to give you a better result? And then it's a little bit like PT. So now, or any kind of therapy, now that's your drill. When you're working on flexibility, you're going to do like this, maybe 1, 2, 3 drills before you start stretching, or just to do like several times during the day when you're brushing your teeth or after you brush your teeth before you go to bed. And so to create a lasting change, right? Because it's great if you can get down once. And then another piece of it, which is our brain has a map. I'm using my hands a lot. I know you can't see on the podcast, but our brain has a map of our entire body, a 3D representation. It has actually several maps of our body. And so, one reason that someone may not be like they can sit in over splits, but they can't do a full 180 split jump, for example, or straddle jump. And one of the reasons, and this goes to threat a little bit actually, is that my brain's like, I don't trust you to dynamically like jump and get your leg up there because I don't really trust that you have control to bring it up there safely and to bring it back down safely. And so one of the exercises, I think I posted this before, is like to actually hold your leg, maybe in a band or maybe a teammate is holding it, and to actually do like really fine motor movements at that end range. So the other brain's like, oh, you do have control. I trust you a little bit more. I'm going to take the brakes off. And so it's just, again, goes to threat. Like, I don't feel safe here, so I'm not going to let you do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many parallels with psychology here because it's
Mm,
often, and I know you've related like pain to the twisties
yeah,
in
yeah,
that it's just it's like a warning. It's a smoke alarm that's going
yeah,
off that for it's the pain or the freeze response or so, your brain is saying, put on like stop sign, there's a threat here. And like in a straddle jump, it might be, I don't want to tear something. Like this feels
yeah,
dangerous. I don't want to land weird. And then in a tumbling passageway, I don't want to go flying out of it. And so that's a
right.
quite useful response. We need that.
Absolutely, yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
it's like, because, yeah, our brain's job, its number one job is to keep us alive, right? It's not
yeah.
to help us run faster, unfortunately, right? So the
Hmm.
power of the brain that is trying to protect us, it's more powerful than the part of the brain that wants to go faster. Yeah,
Yeah, well, and it makes sense how having your leg up and out to the side and drawing little circles is showing your brain, hi, brain, look how I can move my leg safely. Doesn't this feel manageable? It's
right.
like going to the low beam and going, hey, brain, look how I get my hands on every time. See, I'm going nice and
Exactly.
straight. And
Yes.
then the brain goes, okay, thank you for confirming that. Now
Yes.
you are cleared to try a little bit farther range of
Yes.
motion or
Exactly. Yeah.
a little bit higher beam. But then you're going to
Yeah.
get the alarm again, potentially. And then you
Right.
go, okay, let's go draw some more circles. Let's go to the medium beam. And it's amazing how it's like just those little reassurances to the brain. And then you get the
Yes.
green light again.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So,
It's simple but not easy. Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
but it seems like it's a formula. And just like mental
It is a
training,
formula. Yeah.
there's no one size fits all. You have to
Right.
sort of like run the assessments. Now, I'm curious, a lot of the time in my sort of assessing,
Yeah.
learning style comes up. Like
Okay.
really visual people are going to benefit from different mental skills than really kinesthetic people or audio learners. Do you find that
Yeah.
that is that comes up in your work as well? Because I know you have different
Yeah.
approaches.
Yeah, that is, I don't do as much, I guess, subtlety, and that's my own fault. But yeah, so sometimes yeah, there are definitely some movers that if you give them imagery, they're like, oh, I don't know what to do with this. Right. And so, so some of them, actually more dancers, I think, because it's more natural to use imagery in dance and it's, to be expressive. But if that's the case, one of the tools, so it could be, like I have to draw something out, right, if they're a visual learner, or even instead of saying, and this is another topic that I love, instead of saying like get your leg to 90, right, we could draw a picture and just say like this is the angle. If you had tape on your legs, this is the angle that you're at right now. Let's make the angle this. And so they have a visual, or we could even say like we're going to actually put a piece of tape, right, if they're really kinesthetic and need to feel, right, we might like have them kind of brush or rub their leg, right, so really even emphasizing that proprioceptive kinesthetic even more. And this is a combination of visual and kinesthetic, but like let's actually put a piece of tape or really so they can feel. Now I want you to make that tape as long as possible, right? Instead of saying your knee is this, your hip is this, your leg is this. And so it becomes less of a critique of their body and more, this is a goal that we both want, right? So, and yeah, I find it's really a subtle, interesting point where instead of like, you're doing this, you're doing this, your leg is this, your leg is this, your hip is this, open your shoulders, it's I'm wrong, I'm wrong, I'm wrong,
Mhm.
or I'm off, I'm off, I'm off, I'm not perfect, I'm not perfect, I'm not perfect. Instead of like, well, what is the movement goal we really want? So that's, yeah, just another way to think about it. Um, I kind of didn't answer exactly your question, but yeah, so different, yeah. And sometimes they need like more feedback. So we'll add a band to something. Like if you can't really get this circle, like let's make the band heavier or let's add a different band. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love some of your drills, like for kids who are trying to be more flexible in their hamstrings, you have them folding down and handing a pit block to a friend who's also sitting in a pike stretch.
Right.
And
Yep.
their eyes are stretching the pit block forward versus trying to get their hamstrings to stretch longer.
Just to force
And
it. Yeah.
yeah, they're not forcing it. Instead, they're creating like a positive goal of get the block farther out,
Yep.
and then their hamstrings are cooperating.
Yes. Yeah. 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 That's a fun one. And for most, and again, so for same thing, like that drill may work for 80% of the kids. And then you're like, some kids are like, oh, it doesn't really help. So same thing, like a lot of it, I try to teach drills that will work for the majority, but there will always be a couple of kids or 10, 20% where like, this just isn't helping me. But yeah, so that's another example of the external focus where, um, if you're visually indicating like I'm looking at the goal exactly like you said, as opposed to what am I trying to do with my hamstrings, because as soon as I start thinking about my hamstrings, they may actually not be as pliable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because then
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
that, oh yeah, this is a threat reminder that the brain's now
Yes.
like,
Yeah. Oh
oh,
yeah, I'm
that's
like
right,
gonna
I
get
have
yelled
pain
at if
here.
I don't go. Yeah. Yeah. Or I'm gonna
Yeah.
get pushed down or something. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's important to highlight like there are multiple threats. I might not be able
Mm-hmm.
to stretch. I might not be successful. It might hurt. I might get yelled at.
Mm-hmm.
I might
Yeah.
like there's so many threats. I'm the worst on my team when it comes to stretching my
Yeah.
pike. Like all of these emotional threats
Yeah.
that actually then manifest as a physical threat.
Right. Right, which we don't think about. Like, I mean, I think about it all the time, but
Yeah.
normally, right, we don't. And you also talk about this a lot, which I love, is that like the threats don't have to be related to what is in front of you at that minute, right? So the model that I learned is that there's a bucket, right? And so any kind of things can go into it. So anything from I've got a meet coming up, or I am having a little bit of a fight with a teammate, or I'm afraid that my coach is gonna say something, or I have a lot of homework, or I have a test on Monday after the meet, right? Or whatever, like we're moving, and any of those things, like, right, the bucket gets higher and higher and higher. And then once it starts spilling over, that's when things like mental blocks, right? Or just I'm slower, or I'm tired, or I can't sleep, or I have anxiety. So we don't know. It's just this big bucket. And you can't predict what's going to overflow and what the overflow is going to do and what is that going to manifest as.
Yeah.
Um,
And for a 12-year-old,
yeah.
I mean, there's 1,000 things in there at every moment that all
Yeah.
change all the
Yeah.
time.
Right. Yes. And that in and of itself, right, can be a lot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
then to have these little kind of buttons you can press,
Yep.
not like physical or even mental, that
Yes.
you can
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
go like, okay, I'm going to get kind of hit a reset here. And I love, like, I'm imagining your split jump talking about your legs are swords and you're slicing a
Yeah.
pineapple.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like those sorts of things where you can get into like goal oriented thinking rather than, oh my gosh, my split jumps are so bad today. You go into, let's just get like knock that pineapple off, or,
Right.
let's
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Like, do
create
we
an
need a bigger fruit?
image.
Like, let's get a watermelon instead or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then you also
Yeah.
probably get some lightness and some smiles from the kids too,
Yeah.
because creativity, I mean, that's the answer to most every mental issue, is just getting a little more
Ah,
creative,
okay. Yes.
I
Yeah.
would
And to
say.
make it funny and like engage more senses, right? Because that aids learning as well, right? So this kind of thinking about the pineapples. So now instead of, yeah, it makes learning more interesting and fun. And there's a lot of research that shows when you do that kind of cueing or instruction, that retention is also better.
Yeah. So,
So
okay,
yeah.
now if kids are out there getting ready for regionals or Easterns or
Yeah.
Westerns, um, well, and we may be postseason by the time this comes out, I can't remember. But anywho, if you're
Yeah.
getting ready to go out and compete, it's often coaches want to be like, okay, don't forget to like do this and do that. And they give you like a whole bunch of corrections. I have a coach, bless his heart, who I used to work with, who'd be like, okay, here are your final 700 corrections before you go out and
Right.
vault.
Right.
And I'm like, whoo, that's a lot for the brain.
Right. Yeah.
What would you recommend for the coaches out there, or even I'm always like, parents, don't coach your kid. But like
Yeah.
for the coaches out there,
Yeah.
what's the best thing that they can say before a kid gets out there and vaults, or before they go and do their floor routine that's gonna like optimize their neural networks for
Yeah.
performance?
Well, a couple of things. One, I actually recently was reading some studies about this is actually they did studies on elite like D1 professional like field athletes like rugby and things. But what they did, and this is going to be kind of a answer leading into what I would say, but they would show, up to 15 minutes before their game, the coach would either sit down with the athlete and say, "Here are all the things that you did wrong in some game that you need to correct." And then separately, say, same athlete, same coach, they would say, here are some things that you did really well. And so the athletes that went, the times when they got positive feedback where they were shown, here's what you did really well. One, their blood testosterone, their testosterone went up. So that's a performance booster. And they actually performed better on the field. So they measured a number of things like that can measure performance for a rugby player. I have no idea what those are, but not only did the chemicals that help them have more power, speed, whatever go up, but also their performance was better. So taking that, one of the things that I think could be helpful is that in the car or maybe in the hotel the morning of the meet, if you have a really great routine that you did, whether it was in practice or at a meet, I mean, a meet would be ideal because it's a little bit more the same context. Like, watch those routines and remember in your body, how did that feel? And, whatever, and you're the expert at this of like, well, what can I say to myself as I'm watching it or after I'm watching it? And so for the coach, if that's something that they practice, it could just be, if you don't have that readily available, it could just be like, imagine, choose, and they choose, you choose what thing it is that you remember doing really well, or just think about what it feels like to hit that dismount and stick.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yes.
just felt really good just thinking about that. It happened very rarely for me, but just think about what that feels like. And so you're putting a positive feeling into their body, and then it's going to translate to performance, as we know from some studies.
Well, it's like a set of
Yeah.
instructions that you're
Yeah.
priming yourself with. Like,
Right.
remember this, that's what we want to repeat. Whereas so many kids get ready for competition. They're like, oh no, this last week I fell on at least 3 routines and that one day was not good and bars was shaky. And they're, have sort of like that reflection of everything that went wrong and like, oh gosh, I got to really pull it together today, which
Yeah.
really you just like gave your brain a whole set of instructions on what you're looking to accomplish by
Right.
focusing in on that before you compete.
Yes.
So
Which could
obviously
be
we want to pick
threatening.
better
Again, it could like
instructions.
escalate. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so with again with motor learning studies that they've done and just how our brain works, like we can't, and I know I've done this, given like 6 different directions. Okay, on your next vault you're going to do this, don't forget, da 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 da. What tends to happen in the brain is that we don't actually multitask the way that we think, and that what will happen more likely is that the kid is going to pick one thing that are like, okay, I understand that, I'm going to do that. Or the brain's like, this is too overwhelming, this is too much information, I'm going to just dump it all. And so for the coach or the parent who's like, oh, remember this, don't forget what your coach said, da da da, it just is adding to the bucket possibly, and they're going to just tune it out, or they're going to just pick the one thing, and we don't know that that one thing is actually the thing that is going to be most helpful.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I would actually say for parents, if you're curious, just help them get in a good mood. That's the
Yeah.
best thing you can do is get
Yeah.
them like feeling good, like blast Taylor Swift or whatever is the song of the moment. Do like a little dance moves in the hotel room. I mean, this is my style. This is what I would do with my
Yeah.
kids. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, we're dancing. Okay. We're going to
Right.
have a good time.
Right.
And like put your
Or read
fuzzy
a book
socks
if that's
on
what
and
yeah.
grab your stuffy and all's well. Like, yeah, do something that brings you joy. And then
Yeah.
we're not like parents, we don't have to be like, don't forget, remember this. Like, no,
Yeah.
they're okay. They've already trained so many hours to know what they're supposed to do. That parent role is just like good vibes and
Yeah.
food, basically.
Yeah.
That's all
And
you're
at that point they're not going to learn anything new,
no, and from the
really.
coach either.
Right. Yeah.
They're not going to
Yeah.
learn a whole new technique for
No,
their cast handstand right now. For
no.
goodness sake, they shouldn't be, you know,
And
like
right, you don't want them to either, right?
no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nope. Just yeah, like I mean, so it sounds like something that could be good is like just remember how great your warm up was, or remember how
Yeah.
good it felt to nail that warm up. That was so awesome. You're so great. Or remember that routine you did on Friday. Like you got this. And
Yes.
then
Right.
they sort of like lock in on like, oh yeah, I'm good. Okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now I gotta go like into my own past here because I'm like,
Okay.
you gotta help me decode my 14-year-old
Uh-huh.
gymnastics life. So I had a bad back in gymnastics,
Mm.
and it mostly hurt when I was doing back walkovers on beam, which is a skill that would hurt a back,
Sure.
but it didn't hurt like on giants. It didn't hurt when I tumbled. It hurt on
Oh,
beam on the skill that I was terrified of. So I'm assuming that there is a connection here that the brain
yeah.
was trying to derail or put up those stop signs. Like it was sending me the worries, it was sending me the pain, it was sort of like
Yep.
sending me everything. So
Yeah.
if 14-year-old me was like, you can help me, how
Yeah.
would you address that situation? What would be sort of like your assessment process,
Yeah.
and what are the suggestions you would give me?
So I think you've already kind of figured out some of it, right? Which is that pain is a signal, right? In the same way that mental blocks are a signal. And that something is not, if something is a threat, something is not safe, I need to get your attention, 14-year-old Rebecca, right? I need to get your attention that something is wrong. And so one way that I can do that is to produce pain. Right? So pain is a decision that the brain is making based on your safety. And so that could be real threat to the tissues. It could be like an actual injury and inflammation. But we know from modern pain science that it does not have to be. Right? So, because how do you explain phantom limb pain? There is no tissue, there are no nerves, and yet your brain is producing pain as if there were. So it's very possible. So one thing I would do is, so I know that, so I'd ask like, how do you feel about back walkovers? Right?
Oh, I hate
Not,
them. They're the worst. I
yeah,
dread them all day at school. I don't want to do
right.
them.
Right. So I might say, okay, like we'll refer you to somebody, mental coach that could help you with that part of it. But I would look at, so is part of the threat, like one little drop in the threat bucket, or maybe a, whole cup, is it that your eyes are not functioning the way that they should? Because our eyes, our visual system are enormously important, particularly in gymnastics where there's so much going on and such specific things that we need to do with our eyes. And so I would say, okay, so if you just, move your eyes upward and start leaning backwards, let's do that a few times. And let's see if that makes you more or less flexible. And so if it made you less flexible, I would say, okay, that could be a signal. No, we don't know, right? That could be a signal that your brain senses going backwards with your eyes looking up as a source of threat. And so maybe you closed your eyes.
I saw one of your drills on Instagram
Yeah.
where you have
Yeah.
like, so they're holding out like a
Just their
far out
thumb.
thumbs
Yeah.
up, like
Yeah.
so arms all the way extended out in front, looking at the thumb, and then the thumb goes up, the head goes back, the eyes go up. Just
Yeah.
watching somebody do that gave me the heebie-jeebs. Like, so I
Oh,
was like, whoa,
yes.
and I could remember going back and that moment where your head starts to
Yeah.
go back and my stomach dropping and like hitting a physical wall. And I know a lot of
Yes.
athletes who struggle with going backwards have that same, like, it's that moment where you're about to lose control and be heading
Yeah.
backwards head first,
Yeah.
that it like throws up the wall. So, but then, okay, so then I stuck my thumb out and I did a few of those in my office where we got on because I was
Oh,
like,
you
I want
did?
to try
Okay.
this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then it got easier and it got less scary. Just that
Yeah.
active motion of like practicing putting my head back.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Isn't
wild.
that
So,
interesting? Yeah. So again,
yeah.
it's creating predictability. So now I've created a little, like, you think of like, I don't know, for some reason like a column with check marks is coming to mind. But now the brain's like, okay, check. Going backwards with my eyes open or I got to look at something is now not as dangerous. So check. Great. I kind of feel okay doing this. And so then you would do so you could do starting standing up because that's where it initiates. And then you could do lying down. then the laser beam is fantastic, right? Or you could even just imagine like put a sticker on the beam to help your eyes get comfortable with spotting the beam or looking at the beam. Like I know I'm 95% sure I closed my eyes when I did any back, like back handsprings on beam. I'm pretty sure my eyes were closed. And so it was frightening. But
Yeah.
yeah, so and also to train keeping the eyes open or being able to see the beam, because that might have been also, that could be an issue too, right? Like I actually have trouble quickly moving and then actually seeing something.
Yeah.
So we would also do that, right? Whether you maybe you do it on the trampoline first, where you're going to just, go backwards or find a way to spot. And so this is something you can do at home, right? You don't have to be in the gym.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Okay, so
so
now that
yeah,
brings me another question.
yes.
So okay, then let's say they conquer that part and they're like back walkover is happening, it's feeling okay, but the legs just aren't getting straight. And I see this a
Okay.
lot in kids who have fear in a skill where
Mm-hmm.
they are so focused on their hands on the beam for that 1 second that legs get all wacky because there's no
Yeah.
room for other focus. Or I've seen it in
Yeah.
girls who are afraid of going over the bar in a cast handstand, that in
Yes.
that lean, their legs bend and then they snap up straight. But it's like that one moment where they're like, they have to allocate all my focus to this one scary moment. That form is just atrocious.
Yeah.
So is there a way to like kind of allow it all to be there, or is it just
Yeah.
repetition so that you can
No,
trust
no,
the
no,
hand?
no. I think, yeah. So once the hands, and you could even, once the hands are a little more comfortable, right? Because that's the scariest part, right? But there's still, right? The legs bending is still a little sign of threat, right? We kind of tend to
Mhm.
contract inward, right? If you imagine something coming at your head, you're going to contract, right? Bring your elbows up, bend your knees. And so it's a startle response. And so what you could do, again, going external, right? So taking the mind away from the body, and this depends. Some kids this will work, some kids it may not. So you can just imagine, like, so just imagine there's a streamer hanging from the ceiling. Like decide what color it is. What color is that streamer? As you go over, like you have to tap it with your toes. So, and it's far enough away that they actually have to stretch their legs as they're going over, perhaps. Um, and so, just by being a streamer or something, like maybe there's a balloon hanging off of the streamer, and that's more entertaining. So, ask them, like you're saying, be creative about what's there. Or imagine you've got a laser or like a neon light on the ends of your toes, and you're glowing in the dark. So, as you go over, can you make the biggest circle possible? Right, the circumference of that, right? So then that's just naturally going to try to get their legs will stretch to make that circumference. And again, it's kind of a fun image, right? You're in the dark, you can choose what color you want. So just those are a couple of things that you can try. So, and let them, again, like, do you want tape down your legs? Do you want to imagine, right, that you're tapping the streamer? Would you rather have the lasers? Like, which one works best for you? Um, yeah, so those would be some ideas. And then again, it's taking their mind off of their hands also. So that you're giving the brain, like you've said often, like give the brain something positive to focus on. And that can change the movement.
Yeah. Well, and it's
Yeah.
also going to train them to trust themselves. It's sort of
Yes.
like when you're focused on the foam block in the pike stretch, you're trusting your hamstrings. If you're focusing
Yeah.
on your legs, you're trusting your hands. So,
Yes.
of course, you
Yeah.
don't want to trust a stranger. You want to make sure
Right.
you have done enough of these
Yeah.
that your hands
Yeah.
are going to
Yeah.
get on before you can
Yeah.
go, okay, it is officially time to trust our hands and draw a beautiful swirl with our legs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Oh, I
then once
love that.
they've
Yeah.
done
Like
that,
you can, or you'll paint, right? And you have to,
yeah,
yeah, whatever, paint the biggest circle that you can.
yeah, paint a
Yeah.
stripe on the ceiling, it's something
Yes. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and then you're like, and I get excited talking about this stuff.
I know it's fun,
I
right?
I know. I think about, athletes who trust their skills. It's reps and it's like it's coming at things from different modalities. It's understanding the mind body connection. It's knowing those like sort of easy buttons to press. And
Mhm.
coaches, of course, are going to have to try a lot of things and be creative, and athletes as well. But so many great kind of simple hacks here.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I would love to chat a little bit about the vestibular system. What
Okay.
is it and
Yeah.
why does it matter to gymnasts?
Okay. So, yeah, so our vestibular system, as I mentioned, it's like little canals. And you may have heard right? As adults, like somebody had a stone or one of the crystals in the canal. So we have these little tiny canals and then stones that when we move, there's fluid and hairs. So if you could kind of picture, like if I turn my head quickly, that fluid in my canals move, the little hairs in my canals move. That tells the brain, hey, she just turned her head quickly to the side, or hey, she just bent over to pick something up on the floor. And so reflexively, that system is now going to say, we need to protect our brain. So please turn on all the muscles down the back to make sure I don't fall over. Right. So if you can imagine, if that system were offline, if I turned around quickly to see who was behind me and that reflexive response to keep me upright wasn't on, I would just keep spinning or fall over. So at its base, that's what that system is for. It's to keep us upright and alive. But it also contributes to our spatial awareness of where we are in space. It helps, so air awareness, it helps if we're running and we need to keep focus on the board. It helps keep our vision clear while we're running or spotting, right? So if you think of dancers who do like 4 or 5 pirouettes, their ability to come back onto that target is facilitated. It's a vestibular function, right? So when my eyes are, if I'm just turning my head no and I'm looking at something straight, there's a reflexive capability to keep my eyes focused. So if I'm jumping to the high bar, the thing that helps my eyes stay focused is a vestibular system, right? Spotting the floor, spotting a turn. Anytime I'm flipping or spinning, which is all of gymnastics, it's active. And so whenever I'm working with a gymnast, that is one of the first things that I'm going to look at, particularly if they have pain or if they're, or even not, just as a performance tool. So is there, I think about it like satellites. So if your vestibular system is one of your satellites, like, is that satellite working at its highest capacity? Like, is your head turning smoothly, whether you're straight up and down, tilted to the side, upside, particularly upside down, right, where we get this different orientation to gravity? Is all of that functioning well, or does it look a little weird? Or when we do like leaning to the side and turning your head quickly, do you get less flexible? So that would mean, okay, so your brain doesn't like, being leaning to the side or leaning forward, maybe, right? So maybe like when I'm that point where you get a little bit afraid of when I cast a handstand, like maybe my brain doesn't like leaning forward quickly like that. Or maybe if I trained that movement, again, kind of tamping down the threat because now I've done it before, focusing specifically on that, maybe now again I get another little check mark, like, okay, it's safe because now I've kind of trained this movement a little bit more in a safe way. So now my brain understands like this is okay. So that's one thing, just because it's so in demand in gymnastics that the better function it is. For example, I had a gymnast who one of the things that we do to make the stones bounce up and is literally just like kind of bounce up and down. And she had a really hard time doing it. It just looked uncoordinated. I was like, that could be why your split jumps aren't as high as it could be, right? It could be why you're not getting as much power, because this kind of bouncing movement at some level, for some reason, your nervous system is interpreting as not safe. And so, yeah, so that's just kind of the importance of it. And then the other piece of it, as I mentioned before, like vestibular drills can change muscle tone down the back. So your spinal hamstring flexibility can get better. And it's also activating posterior chain, which could improve your run or your power. And so it's kind of this secret weapon, right? It's this untapped source, thanks to neuroscience research. We kind of know a little bit more about what it does. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to use the word dysfunction here, which isn't going to be like a clinical
Yeah.
level of dysfunction.
Yeah.
But if you see somebody's vestibular system is not operating optimally, what are some of the things you'll see? I mean, it sounds like it's those like kind of threat, flinching almost of the muscles.
Yeah. Yep.
What else do you see when you go, oh wow, this kid definitely could have their vestibular system optimized?
Yeah. So one easy thing is, right, again, you put your thumbnail right, so arm's length, arm is straight, you put it right across from the bridge of your nose, and then you just say no. So shake your head no while keeping focused on your thumbnail. If you want, you can even draw a little letter on it. When I see it looks a little funky, instead of just if you think of grapefruit came to mind, but if you think of just a grapefruit like on a skewer and that just kind of rotates back and forth and back and forth, and it's staying straight and pivoting, when it kind of does a little, like it's just not level, it's a little funky, or one side just looks, and gym and coaches are great at assessing movement, so it just looks a little off, right? That's when you know. Or if they say like, I don't like this, right? It's another way. So it's just saying no and then yes. So same thing. If their head is not square as they do like 10 or 20 of these, and it starts kind of veering off to the side, then that tells me there's one side that's not sending the even number of signals as the other. And our brain, particularly from these systems, we don't need to be 100% symmetrical, but from that system for gymnasts, I believe that it's important that they're as even as we can get them. Because if, let's say, actually another one. So if they do back walkovers or back handsprings and their head is just a little askew when they go backwards, which I see quite a bit, just a little bit, think of the weight and momentum of your head going backwards. And gymnasts are fantastic at adjusting for that, so they end up square. But wouldn't it be great if we actually corrected that so their head actually went straight back, so they're not creating this little inefficiency and they're going backwards, straight backwards to begin with. So that's another cue, is a clue, is that do they always fall off to one side? Right? Is their head just a tiny bit off to the side when they, go back handsprings? You can see it in giant, sometimes even in cast a handstand. So that's a clue that there may be some asymmetry. Yeah.
Oh, it's so cool. I mean, I'm imagining that with higher level, like elite level gymnasts, which I know you've worked with elite level gymnasts as well,
Yeah.
that those little tweaks
Oh,
to like
yeah.
head position that can make all the difference in just being more efficient and
Right.
being more powerful, more
Yep.
fluid.
Yep. And so it works with like a level, I mean, 3, 4, 5, anybody, right? They can benefit from this. And that's the cool thing, is that the same drill that I might give to an elite gymnast, I could give to like a level 3 gymnast, and they could both have positive effects.
Well, and then
Yeah.
the level 3 carries it through her gymnastics career, this
Yes.
different mobility. Okay, and are these
Right.
drills that kids can do at home? Is it simple? Is
Yes.
it something that's got to be, like do you have to have your hands
Yeah.
on them? How does the actual practical application of these techniques work?
Yeah. So yes, you can do them at home. You can do them anywhere. And with them, just like anything else, right? Frequency and focus, just like learning a skill, are going to benefit you. And so, right, for the stuff that I've posted some fairly basic stuff. You always just want to test your flexibility, do splits, bridge, whatever, do the drill, and then retest. And if you get a good result, great, then that's a keeper. If maybe nothing, then you can either speed it up, you can do more reps, make it more challenging, do the drill on one leg, do it upside down, do it sideways, and then see if adding a little more intensity makes a better result. If it makes you worse, then you do the opposite, usually, like slow it down, do fewer reps. And then it's really up to, so like it puts them in control, because I, I like this drill. These are my favorites. So I'm going to do them when I get to the gym. If I have a couple of minutes, I can do them at home when I'm just kind of, whatever, I get home, or I get home from school. Before I put my leotard on, I'm going to do a few of these drills. Maybe I do them again before I go to bed, or during practice, right? If I know this is a good one, then, and it helps to have the coach be bought in because I know their kids are like, yeah, I don't want to do this by myself because it looks a little funny, looks a little weird, and everyone's going to ask me what I'm doing. So it does help to have the coach buy in. But yes, you can also do it like before a routine. I've had kids that have certain visual drills that help them on beam. I just felt more square. I felt better. Great. So every time you do routine, you're going to do like 1 minute of these drills. Yeah.
So cool. Yeah, and I'm thinking like it would be so amazing for coaches to just have it be a quick side station. You know,
Yes.
you do your visual drills, you do your physical drills, you get back in line. I
Yep.
mean, what a cool way to integrate all of this into the
That's my
physical
dream.
practice.
Is that every coach
Yes.
is like a side station. They're doing a quick visual drill. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, awesome. Well, if
yeah,
people want to check out all of your amazing content, where's the best way to
yeah.
find you?
So on Instagram, I'm level up neuro. So all one word, level up, Neuro. And then my website is levelupneuro.io. So,
Um,
but the Instagram is really where I'm sharing a lot of the drills. So just to
yeah,
get an idea of what they look like, what I do, all that stuff. Yeah.
it's a total gold mine. Like, go check it out immediately. Follow Yuka. Thank you so much for your expertise and for hanging out today. What a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah.